The one ETF portfolio is one of the most simplest and easiest ways to make you rich and wealthy over time without overcomplicating your long-term investing strategy, since you only have to buy one ETF forever. Now, the one ETF portfolio might sound too good to be true because you have 100% of your money tied to one fund. And it might even seem sketchy or even scary to some newer investors to even have this investing strategy. But a common mistake I see some investors have is either way too much fund overlap or unnecessary over-diversification, sometimes way too many ETFs in their investing portfolio, or not even investing at all in any ETFs because there's thousands and thousands to choose from and they don't know which one to decide on. So in this video, I'm going to be going over some of the best broad market ETFs for a one ETF portfolio with a score criteria such as total return potential, volatility, diversification, and the risk of the ETF, as well as a couple of reasons as to why the ETF is great for a one ETF portfolio. Because every investor has the freedom to choose their own one ETF portfolio based off their own goals and own personal preferences. So without further ado, let's get started. Why a broad market ETF is amazing for a one ETF portfolio is because these ETFs come with typically hundreds if not thousands of different stocks from different sectors of the stock market. So if one stock goes down or one sector is negative, you have many other options to get your portfolio back into the green. And the first ETFs in the broad market ETF category is going to be composed of only US stocks. And the best is the S&P 500 ETF VOO by Vanguard, or SPLG, which is another great alternative. But for transparency reasons, since I have a lot of money in Vanguard's VOO, I'm going to be using it for this S&P 500 example. And the other ETF is going to be VTI, a total market ETF by Vanguard, which I currently have in a separate 401k investing account. And yes, I am transparent about this because honesty is the best policy. So VOO tracks the S&P 500 or 500 of the best performing companies in the United States by market cap, while VTI tracks all the companies in the USA or the entire US stock market, so it has thousands and thousands of stock inside of this fund. In terms of total return potential score of both VOO and VTI, I would give them both a medium total return potential score, since these ETFs are not expected to have high potential outperformance like some growth ETFs, but they're also not expected to underperform the market. And both of these ETFs move pretty similarly to each other from a return standpoint, since they have a high amount of fund overlap and 99.6% of VOO's holdings are also in VTI. So with all this in mind, I don't recommend to have both of these ETFs in one portfolio, but I am breaking my own rule because I do own both VOO and VTI, but they're in separate accounts. Now in my 401k, the next best option was either going to be bonds, and I'm 23 years old, so no. As far as volatility, I would say that the volatility is low for both of these ETFs. Even though there are years when the market is going to be up a lot and even some negative performing years. Since 1957, when the S&P 500 was introduced, it has returned an average appreciation of 10.41% per year. So with over 65 plus years of data, I like that consistency a lot to grow your wealth over time in US stocks with that predictable average return of just over 10%. For diversification, I would give VOO a high amount of diversification. Now in the S&P 500, you pretty much only have large cap companies, but with VTI, you have not only thousands of more stocks, but you also have large cap, mid cap, and small cap stocks inside of this fund. So with VTI, I would give it a higher amount of diversification. In terms of overall risk, I would give both of these ETFs a risk score of low, because these ETFs are going to be very diversified funds and they have a ton of data, decades worth of returns to stand by a strong 10% average annual appreciation, and they even did that during recessions. Both of these ETFs even have a pretty good dividend yield to have some passive income for all you dividend lovers who want this income in the future. And you could legit have either one of these ETFs as a one buy and hold forever, set it and forget it strategy to make you a ton of money, even a multi-millionaire over time, and fund the retirement of your dreams. Now moving on to the next best broad market ETF, that's going to be a world ETF that includes US stocks as well, and that's going to be Vanguard's VT, or their Total World ETF. VT provides broad exposure across both developed and emerging equity markets around the world, including the USA, or in short, you basically own every single stock in the world, almost 10,000 different stocks. In terms of total return potential, I would classify this ETF VT as low to medium, because the returns of VT has historically underperformed the USA, because the US has been the place for investors to invest their money and grow it the best over the past decades. Now these returns could flip and VT could be a medium to higher return potential because Vanguard is predicting global equities x the USA to actually outperform US stocks. So VT could be a sleeper for the next couple of decades, but that's going to be if the other countries inside of VT could actually increase their share price appreciation and keep up with the United States. Regarding volatility, I would say that VT is low and has very similar movements to VU and VTI, but the gap is there because it's not entirely invested in US stocks, which has historically given the best performance. In terms of diversification, VT is definitely the most diversified out of all of these three ETFs, so it will have the highest amount of diversification due to you having many different countries invested in this ETF, and you have almost 10,000 different stocks from the entire world. So it's hard not to make money in the long run with this ETF. As far as risk, I would say that VT is low risk, even though when you start to invest your money outside of the United States, the risk will inherently be higher. Overall, VT is going to be a great ETF for a one ETF portfolio if you truly want to be a diversified investor, because you have international stocks, large cap stocks, mid cap stocks, even small cap stocks, so you really are a worldwide investor. With VT, you also receive a higher dividend yield than US stocks or ETFs for all you dividend lovers, so that's also an added bonus for VT, and overall you could have this ETF as a one set it and forget it strategy for the long term to make you rich and wealthy over time if you do so please. And yes, these are going to be three of the best ETFs for a one ETF portfolio that I seriously would consider if I had one ETF to choose for life. Choose one out of these three ETFs and have a 100% allocation if you want to go that one ETF route for less stress and just to have a simple and easy investing strategy. Now, if you guys like this video, please give it a like because this cute puppy did. And right here is going to be a video on the 3 ETF portfolio that I personally invest in if you guys are interested in that. And right here is going to be a video on how many ETFs you should even own in your stock portfolio. Now, love you guys so much. Continue to crush in the stock market and take it easy. Peace.